The US Air Force wants to arm its powerhouse AC-130 gunships with yet another weapon. This time, a long-range cruise missile that can strike targets north of 450 miles away. Now, the AC-130J Ghost Rider is the latest and most advanced iteration of these close air support platforms. And to be clear, right up front, these are not stealthy aircraft. The AC-130 is based directly on the legendary C-130 Hercules, but what it lacks in stealth, the Ghost Rider makes up for with firepower. This aircraft is equipped with 30mm and massive 105mm cannons. That is a howitzer, as well as a long list of air-to-ground munitions, including GBU-39 small-diameter bombs, GBU-69 small glide bombs, AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, and AGM-176 Griffin missiles. But despite carrying all that heat, the Ghost Rider cannot engage targets any further out than roughly 20 miles. And that is a big problem, because the AC-130 is meant to provide close air support to special operations troops behind enemy lines. And if the US were to find itself in a fight with a nation like, say, China, well, the Ghost Rider would provide a very juicy target for any number of Chinese air defense systems. But that is where Leidos comes in with their Black Arrow cruise missile. Now, details about this weapon are still very scant, but we know it completed captive carry flight tests and inert drop tests from an AC-130J this past October, and was supposed to roll straight into full flight tests not long after. But whether or not they've begun, we can't say, because the Air Force has been very tight-lipped about the testing of this weapon system. But based on statements released by Leidos officials and the Air Force Special Operations Command request that prompted this weapon, we can assess with a pretty high likelihood that the weapon likely has a range in excess of 400 nautical miles. Now that is roughly 460 miles for those of us who aren't pirates. And that speaks to how cruise missiles can provide a very different strike capability from the weapons currently carried by the Ghost Rider. So if you find yourself wondering what's the difference between this Black Arrow cruise missile and the missiles the Ghost Rider already carries, like the Hellfire, the difference is really found in the propulsion. The Hellfire missile and similar weapons are powered by rocket motors that burn very quickly to reach their targets, whereas the Black Arrow and other cruise missiles are usually powered by air-breathing jet engines, not all that dissimilar from a fighter jet or other tactical aircraft. Now that makes it possible for these weapons to fly a lot like aircraft, along fairly horizontal flight paths over very long ranges, thanks to that air-breathing jet propulsion. And we also know that the weapon will carry a multi-mode seeker, which means multiple different types of guidance, but what types exactly Leidos has not disclosed. Chances are pretty good it will include a GPS-assisted inertial navigation system, and maybe either an electro-optical imaging sensor or a millimeter wave radar seeker. But in any regard, this weapon is meant to operate in degraded or denied GPS environments, so it will not rely on GPS alone for its navigation. And while this missile is being tested first aboard Special Operations gunships, Leidos has been clear that it could have much broader applications than that, including platforms like the MQ-9 Reaper, which they say could carry 8 of them in standard flight operations. Now this weapon is said to be roughly 80 inches long with a 9-inch diameter, but even that can vary pretty dramatically, because Leidos says this is a supremely modular system, similar in some ways, they say, to a loaf of bread, where you can pull big chunks of the middle out and replace it with different slices. Those modular chunks could be different warheads or different guidance systems, maybe even electronic warfare suites or intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance or ISR equipment down the road. And because these weapons offer such significant range, they could even allow platforms like the AC-130 and other similarly non-stealth aircraft to strike enemy air defenses from so far out that their surface-to-air missiles couldn't even shoot back. Russia's highly touted S-400 Triumph, for instance, gets the 400 in its name from its maximum engagement envelope of roughly 400 kilometers. Now that's less than 250 miles. And that means with these weapons, an AC-130J could, at least theoretically, take out an S-400 from more than 100 miles further away than the S-400 could even target the AC-130. Of course, in real combat operations, something like that's pretty unlikely to happen, but because this weapon carries an onboard data link as well, it can even get updated target information from other aircraft and sensors in the battle space, including forward advancing F-35s. Now, Leidos touts these weapons as not just being very capable, but also being very inexpensive and easy to produce, which is important because the US is trying to maximize the amount of firepower it can bring to bear in the fight. And Leidos is not the only company with a dog in this low-cost cruise missile fight, as earlier this year, Anduril also announced their own line of low-cost, high-production capacity cruise missiles and their Barracuda M line of weapons. And while I can't tell you exactly how Leidos' Black Arrow is performing in tests, or when or if Anduril's Barracuda M will see the same, I can say that the Air Force's interest in these weapons points to two very specific things. The first is that the Air Force wants to extend the engagement ranges of practically all of its platforms to counter increasingly advanced air defense systems. But the second is the fact that the Air Force is looking to arm a much broader variety of aircraft for the fight, which would dramatically complicate matters for adversary military planners who no longer only need to worry about fighters and bombers striking their targets, but they could soon need to worry about cargo planes and drones striking those targets as well. Or at least, that's the plan behind Black Arrow and similar weapons. Whether or not it ultimately manifests in operation is yet to be seen.